Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of the Master's Coin video blog series. Gregory Goff here. I hope that all is well with you and all that pertains to you. This week's blog has been delayed. Usually I release a blog every Monday. I pushed this blog back because of some things that took place over the weekend that I want to deal with instead of releasing the intended blog. However, I had some production issues and it has delayed the release of this blog up until now. So if you've been waiting, thank you for your patience. If you haven't, well, here I am. Today I want to talk about the NFC Championship game between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. Great game. Seattle won 23-17, but the game was amazing. As a matter of fact, the hits in this game were ferocious. Now, these two teams don't like each other, and it showed by the viciousness of the hits that were taking place and on the field that day. It seemed as if every other play, a player was being helped off the field by training staff, carted off the field, or led to the locker room with concussion-like symptoms. Man, this game was, these teams don't like each other, and it showed. It came down to the last minute. The 49ers driving down the field. Colin Kaepernick threw the ball into the end zone to his favorite receiver, Michael Crabtree, who was being covered by the self-professed best cornerback in the NFL and the protagonist of this entire blog, Richard Sherman. Sherman made a play on the ball, deflecting it, and the ball was intercepted by a linebacker that was trailing the play. And he downed the ball in the end zone, ending the 49er threat and catapulting the Seahawks into this year's Super Bowl. Now, after that play, Sherman ran up on Crabtree, patted him on the behind, said, good game, and extended his hand to him in a sportsmanlike gesture. Obviously, Crabtree was feeling some kind of way, and he mushed Sherman in the helmet. In response, Sherman looked to Colin Kaepernick and threw up the choke sign, and then he ran off the field. Now, as he was running off the field, a sideline reporter for Fox Sports by the name of Erin Andrews, who happens to be a white woman, caught up to Sherman, put the mic in his face, and asked him what happened in that play. And then Sherman went off. He said, I'm the best cornerback in the NFL. I'm the best cornerback in the NFL. I'm going to paraphrase it from here. He says, what do you expect if you throw the ball to a sorry receiver like Crabtree? Don't you ever talk about me. Don't you ever talk about me. Then Erin Andrews asked Sherman who was he talking about, or who was talking about him. And he says, Crabtree, don't you ever talk about me. LOD something. And the producer ended the video in a cutaway to, I think it was Russell Wilson. However, after that tirade, Twitter went in on Sherman. I mean, not since the hatred spewed as President Barack Obama have I witnessed the vitriol that was directed at Sherman after his 25.22 second interview with Erin Andrews. I mean, they were calling him Jungle Monkey, Gorilla, Ape, calling him the N-word, saying he lacked class, professionalism, dignity, called him a thug. I mean, they went in. Deadspin.com has like thousands of tweets that were racial tweets directed at Sherman. You know, now if you don't know Richard Sherman, and it's not really unusual if someone would overlook him because he does play in Seattle and that is not a sexy media market. He graduated from Dominguez High in Compton, California. Compton, to me, the capital of gangster rap. And he graduated second in his class with a 4.2 GPA. he secured a scholarship to one of the most prestigious colleges in the country, Stanford University, where he graduated in 4 years with a 3.9 GPA. As a matter of fact, this summer he began classes. Well, last summer he began classes for his master's degree. He's active charitably in the Seattle community as well as his community in his hometown of Compton. He's definitely a role model and a good example of a successful black man who was faced with insurmountable odds, and he overcame them. And his message to the youth in both communities is that no matter what you face, with determination, hard work, and commitment, that you too can be a success in whatever field that you choose. And I really admire that about Richard Sherman. I really do admire that about him. Now, let me see here. I got some kind of stuff messed up, I think. Yeah, my notes, man. Don't have a teleprompter like TV stations do, so you got to put your notes next to the thing, next to the camera here. Now, 35 cornerbacks were chosen before Richard Sherman in the 2011 NFL draft. I believe he was drafted like in the 5th round. And here it is 3 years later, and he is arguably one of the best corners in the NFL. As a matter of fact, this year he led the league in interceptions. However, that 25.22-second interview kind of like erased all of his past accomplishments on and off the field and characterized him as a thug. Although he never cursed, he never threatened anyone. Now, there's a question that is going on around the country today. Is thug the new N-word? Has the N-word been replaced by the word thug? That's the question that's being asked today. Personally, I have no problems with what Richard Sherman said or did on the field. As a black man, he was just celebrating his excellency. And as a black man in America, I see more black men degenerated than celebrated. So I had no problem with that. Trash talk, I played sports. Basketball, football, baseball, and I talk trash. As a matter of fact, almost everyone I know that played alongside of me talked trash. Trash talking was an acceptable part of the game. As there are sports icons who are notorious trash talkers. There are sports icons who don't talk trash at all. So trash talk is whatever or however you feel about it. So, again, I had no problem with what he did or actually what he said. However, white America, they saw this black guy with dreads and tattoos that was yelling in a white woman's direction, and that was definitely not acceptable to them. You know, and it's shown in over the thousands of tweets that had racial overtones directed at Richard Sherman. I want to know, why do black people have to act in ways just to make white people feel comfortable? And why is it that white society tries to determine what is acceptable behavior for black people? I'm going to say that again. Why do black people have to act in ways just to make white people feel comfortable? And why does white society, or how come white society determines, or who gave white society the right to determine what is acceptable behavior for black people? Going back to Erin Andrews for a second. You know, she received a tweet from one of her girlfriends, and the tweet said, "Erin, are you all right? All of us were afraid for you." They were afraid for her. They were afraid for her. All right. I guess they were afraid because a black, excited, emotional, and adrenaline-filled Richard Sherman was yelling in her direction. All right, and that led to him being called a thug. Where Tom Brady can run up on a ref who's trying to get off the field, impede the ref's departure because he's angry at a call and that they lost the game, and he drops the F-bomb on national TV, and all people can say about Tom Brady is that he is a passionate winner. Not one negative word was spoken about Tom Brady, but yet Richard Sherman is a thug. And mind you, he never swore and he never threatened anyone. All right? Several days ago, I was sent a article by a poet, activist, author by the name of Olivia Cole. Man, she wrote this article. It was a profound piece of work, and I want to read a portion of it that I thought really spoke to the issue at hand. And it said, white supremacist culture dictates who and who doesn't get to be human. In order for people of color to receive the human card, they must assimilate. They must not use slang. They must not wear hoodies. They must be quiet. They must not curse. They must be gracious at all times. They must enunciate. They must not talk about race or racism. They must not listen to rap music. They must not sag their pants. They must not brag. They must not laugh in public. They must not take up more than one seat on the bus, and they must not ever ask for more. In short, you must be perfect, robotic even. If you are a black professional athlete who performs in front of a million of Americans playing a game in which aggression, testosterone, and energy are rewarded and demanded, afterward, you must be quiet, gracious, calm, unassuming, unscary. To be black and also to be considered human, you must never make a mistake. Or you're a thug. Or you're ghetto. Or you're the other. And your human card is denied. Ooh, man, that speaks so much truth in today. You know, she gave some examples of what you must not be, or you must not laugh, must not sag your pants, must not wear hoodies. All of those things come from actual events that have taken place within the last year to African Americans all around the country. I remember reading about how a group of black teenagers were eating outside somewhere downtown in a major city, and they were having a good time laughing, and there were some more white people that were also in that area, and they were offended because the blacks were just laughing and having a good time, and they told the restaurant people, and they got the police, and they told the blacks they had to be quiet. You know, the Trayvon Martin saga, he was suspicious, and part of that suspicion was him wearing that hoodie. You know how they feel about rap music. Jameis Winston won the Heisman and the national championship, and because he was excited, he didn't enunciate and speak proper English, and he used some slang in there. They had a problem with that. So I think what she said is so true and profound in the time that we live in. Now, in the last few days, I've had some conversations with people on Facebook and Twitter, some face-to-face folks that I know pretty well. Everyone has a variety of thoughts and opinions on the issue, and honestly, I respect everyone's thoughts and everyone's opinion. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, happens to be white, and he said, Gregory, I know you don't feel that way. And I said, feel what way? He said, feel that it was racial overtones that were directed at Richard Sherman. I said, of course I feel that way. And he looked at me as if I was somebody else. And he said, I never thought you were like that. I would never have thought you were like that. And I said, like what? And he was like, racist. I said, racist? I said, why? Because I feel that, the things that they were saying to Richard Sherman were racist. He said, yeah, man, I didn't never think that you were racist. And it plays And just that statement alone plays into the narrative that if you bring up race or racism, that you're the one that's racist, in spite of the reality of all the racism that is around us in our everyday experience, and I had the opportunity at that time and in that conversation to, deny what I knew what was the truth, and this guy would have smiled and he probably would have shook my hand and it would have solidified our friendship and he would have patted me on the back and all that good stuff. I would have been all right and I would have been okay and I could have assimilate into his world. But because I stood my ground on what I knew it was true, our friendship is strained. Some of my friendships are really no longer because of my position, and he would have smiled if I would have denied my reality, but it was about an issue of integrity with me. And so I stood on what I believed in, and he may not like me anymore, but he has to respect me. And I think that hearing some responses from some African Americans, via Facebook, Twitter, various conversations, I think that they may want to consider or reconsider their own integrity when it comes to that. It's when it comes to the reality of race in the world we live in. I feel that how can any black person deny the reality of racism when we don't even have to go out the front door? Just turn on the television and racism smacks us in the face daily. However, people don't want us to talk about race. They don't want us to make any noise. They want us to be, there's a book by Ralph Ellison pops to my mind called The Invisible Man. I've read it like 3 times. I often go back to it, and I just went back to it recently to read some highlighted passages, especially when it speaks to the events that are taking place today. And Ralph Ellison was describing his experience in being a black man in America, how America wants a black man to be invisible, not seen, not heard, to live in the shadows, to not demand that America or white America acknowledge his humanity. And so in these conversations, the invisible man just kept playing in my mind. And as I speak about black authors, a little sidebar here, I remember James Baldwin, an amazing African-American writer from the Harlem Renaissance. He left America because he couldn't deal with the racism here. He couldn't deal with not being accepted as a human being, with God-given rights. And so he left the country. So as I look at this issue with Richard Sherman and the responses of white people and black people, I cannot deny who I am just so that I can be accepted by white people. I cannot deny the reality of racism just to assimilate in a culture that really doesn't respect me as being human. So I think that, again, like I say, it's an issue of integrity, and perhaps we need to all take a look at that. Really, it's this white supremacist ideology that's responsible for murders of black people in this nation since slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, the civil rights movement, all the way till today. I mean, several months ago, an African-American girl named Renisha McBride, she's like 5 feet 2 inches, and she gets into a car accident in the outskirts of Detroit, and she goes up to the house to look for some help, right? And behind the door is a white man, 6 foot 2 inches. And when he finally opened the door, he had a shotgun, and he shot Renisha in the face, killing her instantly. And when asked why, he said he felt threatened. 6 foot 2, 5 foot 2, 12 inches bigger than this black woman. He's in his home behind a locked door, and he feels the need that he has to shoot her because he felt threatened. Is this the same mentality that Erin Andrews' friends had when they tweeted her and saying and asking her was she all right, and that they were afraid for her, even though Renisha McBride didn't have dreadlocks? Her skin was black. So it seems as if there is the fear of black skin or black people. Not just black men anymore, but black women have been demonized as well when it comes to this. Jonathan Farrell played football for the University of Florida. He just got a brand new job in a Fortune 500 company, Fortune 200 company, I believe. And he got into a car accident in a rural section of the town that he was in, and he stumbled to a house, knocking on the door. Behind the door was a older white woman, and she looked through the peephole, saw this big black man, and she calls 911. Jonathan recognizes no one's going to open the door, and he leaves the house, and he makes his way back towards the car. The police are coming now, and there are 3 of them. One officer, who happened to be white, discharged his gun 12 times. 10 bullets hit Jonathan Farrell, killing him instantly. And I just learned in the last couple of days that the prosecutor asked the judge to allow them to have a charge that's lesser than involuntary manslaughter. As if, hey, there is no value to the lives of African American people. Richard Sherman had an interview the other day, in which he mentioned the hockey game. I remember a friend of mine also mentioned the hockey game on Facebook, and I was talking the other day, and a couple of people also mentioned this hockey game. And Richard Sherman said that there's this hockey game. They didn't even play hockey. They just threw the puck aside and started fighting. And Richard Sherman goes on to say, and they call me a thug. Hockey's a predominantly white sport, watched by a predominantly white audience. I'm quite sure that, there are some black hockey players, and I'm quite sure that some black people do watch hockey, but an element of hockey, which has nothing to do with the actual game itself, is accepted as the norm, and that's the thuggery, the fighting. These players who beat each other senseless and bloody are not called thugs. They may be called goons, but there is no negative connotation that's added to them. It's an accepted behavior. But Richard Sherman, who just celebrates the great play that he had and his great ability that he has, is called a thug. See a hypocritical double standard there? There is a saying that has been around for a long time. You don't ever talk about race, politics, or religion, right? Personally, I feel that's the problem. We don't talk about it. There's no conscientious conversation about race. You bring it up, they say you're race baiting, and it ends the conversation. All right? And it plays into the narrative that if you bring up race, you're the racist. All right? When we live in a racist society, just face the facts. It needs to be talk. It needs to be a conversation on race at all levels of society. There's no doubt about it. And so I'm not afraid to talk about it. You know, we have children that are growing up that are going to have to deal with the reality of racism. And if we don't talk about it and we ignore it, and then they go and face this world and they're smacked in the face with it, and they don't handle it properly, then it's really our fault, because we ill prepared them for the reality of life. And it's going to be our fault. Could it be that what we're seeing in the African American community with our youth and the violence with our youth are a result of them feeling having a feeling of helplessness, that they are facing they're running head on into these walls of institutional racism at every level, whether it be in education, whether it be in economics, whether it be just in the criminal justice system. Everywhere they turn, and they recognize this, and because they don't have or have not been taught conflict resolution, they don't know how to resolve these issues, because the adults are not talking about them and not helping them navigate their way through this, that they are acting out in ways that are detrimental to their own well-being and are going to cost them in the long run. So I feel that there needs to be a conversation. We need to talk about these things. We ignoring them does not make them go away, and living in your own little vacuum does not help the issue as well. So I brought them up today. I hope that this will stimulate conversation among people. And I just want to thank you for checking me out once again. Monday, I'm going to release the next blog. It's going to be part 1 of a 2-part thing I got going on. So I hope you guys enjoy your weekend. If you're stay warm, stay safe, stay comfortable, depending on what part of the country or the world that you're in. All right, thanks. Enjoy your day.